Hi, everybody. Hi, Karen. So great
Hello,
to be
hello.
here. My name is Erica Sandoval for everyone that just joined. Erica Sandoval, again, I am the founder and president of Latinx in Social Work and Sandoval Collab. So excited to say that because I just started my business, which is so incredible because I get to collaborate with incredible people like Karen, who I'm going to tell you more about. I first want to share a little bit about the work that we do. I'm a clinical social worker, very proud social worker, one of three social workers in the family. I'm the oldest. I always say that they followed in my footsteps, and we're all so unique and different, and we share space within our community to help our communities heal and resolve and just really get through their life with support and without really trying to cause no harm to our clients. One of the things that I really am very, very clear about is the reason why I became a social worker is to really support my Latinx community because I do speak English and Spanish fluently, and there's not enough of us out there that do that and can support our communities. Just showing up and speaking their own language and really feeling like we are close enough to understand how they identify and how they show up in their family systems and in their communities. So I had a really incredible idea after speaking with so many amazing social workers while we have been sheltering in place throughout this pandemic of reaching out to incredible social workers to hear how they're coping through the pandemic and seeing what's happening, and especially my Latinx community, who I know there's not a lot of us in social work. And the more and more we started speaking, the more I realized we shared a lot of commonalities and we shared so many incredible experiences, but all very, very much uniquely. And it was an opportunity for me to really think about how can I do some incredible work to really bring all our voices to the table. And so Latinx in Social Work was created, and it's a book that is about space, the space we take up, the space we create and nurture, and the space that yes have to exist for us, but are so crucial to the growth and development of Latinx social workers, mental health practitioners, executives, and professionals in all industries in this country and beyond, and especially crucial to the community that we serve. So this book is extraordinary and revolutionary. It's about stepping in and creating a movement that is committed to owning our own narratives and naming common but unspoken struggles and challenges and driving our own healing from the past while highlighting our successes and coming up for space and hope for the future and creating more space for our community and for ourselves and healing and inspiring and connecting with our communities. So we brought 20 incredible authors, 21 now together, and they have shared so vulnerably and so raw their narratives and what they do and how they show up. And what's the most exciting part is I get to really be humbled to connect with all of these amazing social workers and know that I'm not alone. And we have become a collective of healers that now it's not about me. It's about us. And so their success is my success and their pain is my pain. Because as we're healing our communities, we're also healing ourselves and we're also continuing to heal from our own traumas. And so being here today, sharing in this space at the Puppet Festival is so important because we use therapy in so many different didactics and so many different ways. And I am so proud to introduce one of my colleagues, one of my peers, one person that I so look up to and I think is so incredibly fabulous is Karen Ciego, who's a licensed clinical social worker. She's one of the authors of Latinx and Social Worker, and she is an entrepreneur. She's a psychotherapist, an educator, an advocate for the healing of BiPoC communities. She has over 11 years of social work experience that include providing bilingual Spanish and identity affirming mental health services to children from the ages of 15 and 19 and their families in schools situated in East Harlem. In her current post as a psychotherapist and director of clinical and consulting services of Clinicians of the Diaspora, LLC, Karen draws on her experience, inventiveness, and humor to design and execute workshops, facilitate support groups, and provide individual psychotherapy to creatives, those who are creative at heart. And she lives in the Bronx with her two daughters and spends her free time looking for ways to laugh hard. And I love laughing with you, Karen. So I'm so excited to be here with you today and sharing this space. And thank you so much for sharing your gift with us today. And thank you so much for sharing your story. So stay tuned, everyone, to read Karen's story in Latinx and Social Work, coming out October 5th during Hispanic Heritage Month. There's so many incredible people. Karen.
Thank you so much, Erica. I feel so like warm and fuzzy inside having heard that, and I am very, very honored and privileged to share this space not only with you but also whoever is joining us today. They're welcome into my home virtually, and thank you for allowing me a space into your home as well. And as we were thinking about puppetry, right? Puppetry specifically. And it's therapeutic, like how it's healing effects and all of those things. I started to think, and I got a little too intellectual with it in the beginning. I was like, and then I spoke with you and you said, just tell your story. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll do that. And as I was thinking about that, my thought went to, you know, children, but then I started thinking about the profession again. And then I thought, you know what, Karen, you were a child once too. And that's kind of where my entire mind was transported to being a kid again. And believe it or not, there was a time when my parents, both of them from Guatemala, both of them Spanish speaking, and I only spoke Spanish at the time, where people would come up to both of my parents and ask them, does she talk? And I thought, you know, looking back on it, like how ironic and how funny it is now, you know, looking at how far things have come, how far away that I've come, because at that time, I remember being so incredibly anxious around adults that I couldn't even put words together. I couldn't even exchange a small conversation or small talk or say buenos dias or buenas tardes to like my family members who I barely saw. And I always used to beat myself up about it. And I didn't know like what was going on with me until fast forward when I became an adult and started going to social work school. And I realized, and I did a little homework and self-diagnosed myself.
We all do that in social work school, by the way.
Oh my gosh, try not to. Yeah. But I was able to find what I think I had was selective mutism. So selective mutism, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is a person's inability to speak in certain situations. The anxiety level is such, it's almost very debilitating to the point that even though a child or an adult has the ability to speak, they're just not able to like conjure up the words in the moment. And I thought to myself, man, and I thought about also like the thoughts and the feelings as a kid that I had, that if I spoke, that maybe I was going to be humiliated, that if I spoke, that someone was going to laugh, if I spoke and maybe said the wrong word in English, like that someone would just, you know, call me out on it. And it was just a humiliating thing. And even talking about it right now, I'm like transported in a sense to it. And maybe I'll explain why that is in a bit, that I'm transported in that way. But so fast forward back to, you know, school and all of those things. I learned about it and I said, okay, thank goodness that's behind me now. Mm-hmm. And then I, after grad school, I went to, I worked at a hospital. And during that, that opportunity was presented to me, a chance to work with children, just like you mentioned before. in East Harlem. I worked in various schools with children. I did work with teenagers, but also with children who were in pre-K through 18 years old. And I remember walking into my office for the first time and see an entire room of toys. And I was like, oh my God, it's coming together now. Because I remember as a kid, one of my favorite things to do would be to go home and play with my toys. I was an only kid at the time. And I would play with, I had a few dolls, and they were my students, right? And then I also had I only had one puppet, just one, but I put them to the side or whatever, right? And I remember teaching them English. Now, I wasn't teaching them anything because I didn't know English, but I said to them, I remember saying to them, "Palabra mono to follow." So things that sounded English to me, that's what I would say. and then I would take a doll, and I would make believe that was the teacher, who was teaching everything. And I explained to all of them, I explained to the classroom that this doll is really shy, so be very nice to her. And I thought to myself, so I keep having these like back and forth, like experiences where I'm like thrown back into childhood and thinking about, what was I going to do now with all of these toys? Because in that school at that time when I first started, I was working with children. That school specifically was pre-K through 5th grade. And I looked at those toys and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I really don't know what I'm doing. So one of the things that I started looking up was like, let me learn about like play therapy. Let me take a couple of courses. Let me do some certification programs that are going to put me in a good space so that I know more about play therapy. And play therapy, basically in my own words, because if you look it up, if you Google play therapy, you're going to get this like really fancy, like
intellectual, right?
For what? What?
Yeah, so, just take it explain it to like us, like,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So basically, play therapy is a way of using a child's inquisitiveness, their readiness, their eagerness to learn, and using it to your advantage and finding ways of like either diagnosing or helping with their mental health healing. That's
absolutely. And And you know what? The point that you make is about meeting the child where they are. It's like showing up. So you're showing up into this space with this vulnerable human being at a specific age that you need to really understand where they are. You don't want to stand up and talk to them, right? You don't want to stand and talk at them. You want to sit, you want to get on the floor, and you want to talk with them. And if they're not talking, what do? How do you engage in play therapy? I'm sure you have interacted with some of your clients. And how have you used puppets and play therapy to interact?
Yeah, so that was the big challenge, right? Because although I found a way of advocating for myself through my employer to get more training and certification and all the good stuff, it was great. It was good. At the very same time, the kids were my biggest, most impactful teachers in this whole entire experience, because which is funny, because a funny story I'll interject, I'll put it in here about these teachers. So just to give you a taste about the teachers, the little teachers.
I love the little teachers.
Let me tell you about
I love my beautiful little, right? Yes, they do. They teach us. They're our best guides. Tell us about the little guides, the little teachers.
Yeah, so the little teacher, one of the little teachers, I remember walking down the hall, and I was probably going to wherever I was going, and one of them recognized me because I did see them for therapy, and they were walking with their there's a paraprofessional. You know, there's certain children who have special needs who require additional one-on-one attention in order to perform well in school. So this child who I knew, who I worked with, was walking down the hall with their para. Now the paras might assist them to go to the bathroom, ensure that they are eating well, are following the instructions, so on and so forth, just to, you know, give you a little context. So the little girl, who at the time was about 6, came over to me and she gave me this huge hug, and I felt so good, you know, because I hadn't seen her for the week as yet. And then all I heard the para say was, "Did you wash your hands when you left the bathroom?" And I was like, ah, dang. So this is one of the little teachers, and it's just kind of to show like how we forget sometimes. Yes, children are children and they're going to forget certain things, but if we open up our minds to their ability to really teach us something, they will teach us a lot about what we thought we knew. And so one other teacher, one of the most impactful ones that I thought about when I thought about puppetry, right, was I had a couple of puppets. I didn't know what I was going to do with them in the beginning. But it just so happened that one of the little teachers is the person who decided that they were going to teach me about puppetry. Right?
I love that.
So this child at the time was about 5. And they were referred to me along with their sister, who at the time went to the same school and was approximately 9. The child who was referred to me, we'll call her Lexi. The sister was in the 4th grade at the time, about 9 years old. And sometimes I would see the sister and Lexi together. Sometimes I would see them apart. And the reason for referral for me seeing them was because their mother had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And, you know, of course, Lexi had a very limited understanding of what that meant.
Yeah.
And the 9-year-old, of course, was better able to grasp, you know, the heaviness of the situation.
Right.
Because of this, and because of like the way that they interacted with each other in such a loving manner, and they supported each other. I did see them often for joint, you know, therapy sessions where we did a lot of play therapy. We would play with the dollhouse. Lexi would play with dolls and what have you. Now, Lexi was born a boy. Lexi had been born a boy and had been insisting on, had demanded to be called Lexi. And Lexi was not their given name. And the mom, who I had already spoken to on several occasions, you know, in preparation for my work with Lexi and the sister, was very open, was very supportive of Lexi's right to self-identify as a girl. Right. The issue, though, was that the school, not so much, ironically enough. And we're talking about a time when we were really, the school should have been in a better place to respect a family's identity and their request for it to be respected. And so it created like a little bit of a lot of friction. And even though that was supposed to, the reason for my work with Lexi was originally the mother's diagnosis, it ended up kind of being about, being gender nonconforming.
Right. Okay? Right.
And the way that I found this out was through Lexi herself. So we were, at some point I decided that we were going to just separate the brother and the sister, and we were going to work around certain issues that started to bubble up because I had this inkling that there was something more. And we were playing with the dollhouse, Lexi and I, and Lexi would have this thing that she would do where she would kind of either hide behind her hair because she was growing her hair long, or she would kind of hide under the table.
Okay.
And at this time, I knew that Lexi liked certain dolls and things, and I saw Lexi kind of eye this puppet. A little bit about this puppet. Let me tell you a little inside. The puppet was a little bit dirty inside. I think kids over the years had started
Like
using
you, like
it.
when you put your hand in, like it just felt like fuzzy and
It
gotcha.
felt,
Okay.
and then you take it out, and I was like, I was advocating for more puppets because it was just not hygienic. Let's just put it there. But Lexi had found it, and I remember it was like a fuzzy. It wasn't Elmo, but it was a fuzzy hand puppet, you know, with a movable mouth, right? And and it was Elmo-ish, but not quite Elmo, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was, you know, the gender of the puppet you couldn't really tell.
Right.
It's whatever you wanted it to be, right?
Right.
And so I found it very interesting as a diagnostic a tool that they would select the puppet, and then the rest of the toys were the dolls that kind of came,
The props, like the props.
Yes.
And yes. And
Yeah.
so when Lexi selected the puppet and you used it, because you gave her complete autonomy to select whatever she wanted, and she selected that puppet, which was a non-gender item. So, and you know, it's very difficult right now to have like something that is non-gender and it's just very neutral. So puppets are so important because they just show up the way they do. And you can
Right.
make them anything you want them to make. And Lexi made them. What did Lexi do with the puppet? And how did she react to her environment? Like what was
Yeah. Good question. So what Lexi did pretty much, one of the things that kind of taking a page from how they were leading, and this is one of the things that to your point, Erica, from before, where we meet a child or a patient or a client or a person where they are, kind of there was this idea that this was such an interesting and very sacred moment where most of the time, Lexi would probably take a back seat to everything that was going on. And instead, this was an opportunity for Lexi to tell their story. Yeah. So it was exciting to have seen Lexi take a hold of this puppet, because then I could ask the puppet the questions as opposed to asking Lexi, because, well, you know, we saw what was happening before, like the hiding behind the hair and the hiding underneath the table. So this was a very exciting moment. And so we were playing with the house, and the house kind of, Lexi would hide behind the house. Now the house, granted, was big. So a lot of times all I would see would be the hand that comes around the house. And then just kind of like Lexi manipulating the characters around the house, because you could put your hand through the house and manipulate it into every room, right? So I would ask the puppet, you know, to talk to me about what's going on. Why is the family? So there was a representation of the sister. There was a representation of the father. And there was a representation of the mom. The mom would kind of go back and forth between the kitchen and the living room where the rest of the family was sitting. And then at some point, Lexi took the father outside of the house and put them somewhere where it's like you couldn't even tell that they were part of the family. So I asked the puppet, you know, why is Lexi out over there outside? Why is Lexi there? And I mean, why is Dad out there? And Lexi actually, through the puppet, said, Dad is busy. And I thought about it to myself. I was like, oh, you know, I do know, and Lexi would not have known that I was trying vehemently to involve the father in the treatment so that we could at least have one family session. Right. And there was some avoidance of that going on. And I then later found out that there was some hesitation and some ambivalence on the father's part too about the entire idea of accepting Lexi as a girl. Right. Now, if we were to really, and it was amazing to me to think that the act of playing was able to reveal that to us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to give
Yeah,
voice.
absolutely. What, Karen, it's like you started unpacking so many layers of Lexi's experience and her being at the age that she was, we're not gonna come in as kids and talk about what we're feeling. We're not going to say, "Hey, this is what's going on." That's not how kids show up. They show up differently. And they show up with the feelings, but the way they identify with the feelings is through play
Right.
and through the puppets. And so you were able to have Lexi speak on how she was feeling through the object relational, like,
Right.
puppet, right? So remember,
Right.
like, our object relations,
Relation.
when a cut, right? So this was the object, this was a safe object, and this, she didn't have to identify with this object, and this object kept her safe, and she felt safe enough to speak her truth through this object. And you know what I find is that we sometimes do this as adults too.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, think of the psychodynamic therapy that we go through. Sometimes, like, when you have all this anger and you pent up. So let's say we could have, like, used dad in a room and said, "Well, tell me how you're feeling about whatever is," and he couldn't, or he wanted to express some anger or some, whatever it is, what other feeling it may be, but couldn't express it to his family. So you add like a puppet, or you add an object, and they express that to it, and it's almost feeling like relieving because they got it out. They're not internalizing it, and they're not feeling shame and guilty, but it's like healing and releasing.
Yes.
So
Yes.
to not, right?
Yes.
So we're not going to intellectualize like the healing properties of puppetry. We're really here to kind of share the work that is being done through puppets and healing in all these spaces. I love that, Karen.
No, thanks. Thanks. And this is why, this is why Lexi was one of my first very impactful teachers, especially around, specifically in that situation around puppets, right? Because, because then, because of the fact that it was a hand puppet with a moving mouth, it almost kind of obligated like some narrative to come out, for Lexi to be able to use her words, or their words. By the way, I use her and their because, of course, at the time, Lexi was too young to, announce their pronouns. But, so at the time, I remember thinking that they were being able to finally put some context to what they were going through, and then I was better able to know how to move forward with supporting the family. So it gave me a little bit of a glimpse into the true dynamics that maybe the rest of the family weren't able to, or were not willing to shed light on. It may have been easy to sweep it under the rug. So I remember thinking, man, I'm onto something. Woo! This puppets, and I'm gonna get like maybe a couple more. And while I was doing my my research about that at that time, this is over maybe 8 years ago or so. So I remember doing the research around like puppets and what their symbolism and how to use them, and looking at getting more of a broader collection of them, because of course there are some that can be animals. And now for therapeutic reasons, I mean, the ones that work the best with children happen to be the hand ones. Or if you're doing like art therapy, you can have like an entire little session where they can create their puppets and impose like identities onto them. And so it's very empowering to be able to do that with a group of children. But most of my work was with individuals. So then I remember looking at like the symbolisms behind some of them. Like if you get an animal, like say a tortoise, a tortoise, that kind of really resonates with the shy child, and it's something that we could talk about where it facilitates conversations about boundaries and anxiety. And whenever like a child would pick up one of the turtle, if they would just like retract the head or whatever, I would kind of know like, oh, they're feeling a little, I need to like loosen them up a little bit. And then by the end, they would kind of like peek out a little bit. And that's how I would know.
That's so
So
amazing.
that's something that later on came.
But that's what I'm saying. It's like, you don't get taught all of this in social work school. We have to be honest about that. Like social work school gives us the foundation of what we need. And then our clients and the work that we do within our spaces of practice teach us. And in addition, continuous trainings and certifications teach us as well.
Absolutely.
And I think that you catching it and you being really present and seeing and meeting your little teachers, your guides, in their space, and really acknowledging that they're being seen and that they're being heard and they're showing up in those spaces that way. That's the beauty of what you're doing with the kids, because a lot of the times they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard, they don't feel empowered, they have no power. Right?
Right. I mean, especially when we're working with children who are of backgrounds that culturally ascribe to the mantra, children are to be seen and not heard. And so this creates a unique opportunity for a child to finally have a voice, which may have been part of, like I was having those flashbacks at the time of doing the work. There were not enough platforms, there were not enough opportunities for little me to even practice having a voice. So a lot of it was like superimposed or imposed by culture and upbringing. And it's so interesting because if we're able to really assist children in finding their voice, it really begins to break the cycle, so that when, say, for example, there's less of a culture shock when you're the first in your family to go to college. There's less of a culture shock when you go to be in these professional spaces where you're expected to speak,
And that's so exhausting and nerve-wracking, and you still have those feelings of showing up as a child, right? And we talk about that in the book. We're talking about some deep, raw feelings that even as clinicians, we can identify with what that felt like, especially Latinx identified clinicians, especially clinicians that identify as, migrating to this country and not even really understanding where we are as kids and really trying to fit in. There's so much of that. And I know that you have shared that a lot of the work that you've done also in Spanish and in English and with play therapy and puppets. And do you notice that when you're working with puppets and using the dialect or the language and just assimilating some kind of safety by just showing up and being like right with them and with their language? Do they speak different languages, these puppets? Because you gave your puppet like this like language that you wanted to. It was almost like you were healing through really projecting your anxiety to your puppet when you were younger, right?
Yes, it was actually, and that was one piece that I forgot to mention, how mutually healing, even as the therapist in the space, it was. It was like kind of like a restorative, a corrective experience for me as a clinician of color, to actually be able to kind of like heal my child self while working with children. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But to your question, yes, it felt like having two superpowers, right? So it felt like being like the child whisperer, like, because through the puppets and through the toys, was able to kind of like peek and peer through a door that a lot of people don't have a lot of adults don't take the time to really understand the language of play. And so there was that. And then the door behind the door was the language, the language, and being able to really communicate in a way that really spoke to the children, because this particular school, you know how they have New York City schools now. In one building, there might be 3 different administrations in 3 different schools. So this building held 3 different schools inside. And one of them happened to be a bilingual school. So there were many kids who were monolingual, Spanish speaking, who maybe under other circumstances would not have been able to connect with a bilingual social worker. So like to be able to have, you know, a skill on top of a skill on top of a skill to help the healing was really one of the highlights of my life, you know?
That's amazing, Karen. I really love all of the work that you are doing and continue to do for the communities that are just in need of this incredible support and healing. You know, I want to share, if you don't mind, like something that I remember how I used a puppet with one of my kiddos. I call them kiddos. I used to work for a wish granting organization, and it was a beautiful time when I would go into the kids' home and really try to find what their wish is and speak to the kids. And unfortunately, some of the kids were unable to verbalize their wish because they were either selective mutism or they just were unable to verbalize it due to a neurological condition. And through just play therapy and through puppetry and through really kind of using, I brought into these 2 little sock toys, and it was like really awesome to just use them and to point to certain things, and they then put the puppets in their hands and they started kind of almost talking but pointing to certain objects that I set forth. And it was, you won't believe what kind of wish it was. I bet you know. What do you think? They wanted to go somewhere. Where do you think they wanted to go?
Where
We
did
don't have to say it. They wanted to go meet a really famous character somewhere in Florida. That's all we're
no, I
going to
was gonna
say.
say like
That's all we're going to say. We're not going to give it props.
the
You know,
big D.
the big D. Yeah, exactly. But you know what? But I didn't realize like that was part of the play therapy. I didn't realize, and I mean, I came in as a clinical social worker, but
Right.
really as a person that's meeting them where they are and trying to figure out, hey, how can we really understand what it is that they are feeling and what they are wanting and what they are needing? Because sometimes, even though you can't verbalize it, they still have feelings and they still have ideas. And we
Right.
minimize it, right? So when we're using this incredible healing therapeutic play with puppets, you're giving them a voice.
Quite literally.
Literally.
Quite literally. And I think, you know, one of the things that is very interesting about therapeutic puppetry or puppetry in therapy, I mean, there are different it's increasingly becoming a niche and a specialty throughout the world. And when I remember doing some of my like homework and things and thinking that I was like this genius, like back in the day, like with the teachers, with the little teachers, because I thought, you know, like I cracked open like this code, and in reality I didn't. And there was in the research, I found like somebody who was credited, at least in the United States, okay, in the United States, and we already
let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay? So in the United States, there was I want to say he was a psychologist or psychiatrist out of New York City's Bellevue Hospital, working with children in behavioral health issues who at the time, you know, this is in the 1930s and 40s, right, had decided, you know, that puppetry specifically was a cost-effective way of giving children kind of like a space and opportunity to like to release aggression, right? And then like I was like, oh, okay, so he got it like maybe like 40 something years ago. But in reality, I mean, therapy and puppetry really, with it being, you know, so ancient, right, and its healing properties throughout the world, is something that we are actually borrowing from. You know, it's something that we we were kind of like taking a little bit of the wisdom and the healing properties of puppetry, and we're marrying them with therapy, and that's how we come to therapeutic puppetry. You know, so we got to give credit where it's due.
Of course. And we're borrowing from. That's like such a beautiful way. It's like merging, and it's not this big, you know, idea that came from this one place. Because I think it's been in existence for how centuries?
For centuries.
Centuries.
Throughout the world, throughout Greece, throughout Africa, throughout certain places. And so to see it, it's a little magical regardless. Nonetheless, to see two very powerful things come together for the purpose of intentional healing, especially with a lot of the children with whom I was tasked with working at that time. A lot of them would come with behavioral issues, but that was because of trauma or like life transitions, like divorce and sudden death, and all of the or immigration or separation from their families, because there were quite a few children who would be without one of the parents, either due to deportation or for whatever myriad of reasons. They would be left behind with family members. And so as a small child, how do you articulate, you know, the pain and the trauma that's related to that? And so that's one of the reasons that I was very eager to embrace the language of play therapy, and specifically because I'm a child at heart. A whole lot of the time, I am a little bit, I have an affinity towards things that I can manipulate. So there were definitely times when I would take the toys myself and, you know, use them. And I think one more example that I have about trauma.
That's so important to note, because I think that for most of us that have experienced this pandemic and the way we have experienced it, there has been a lot of trauma. And trauma shows up in all these it shows up differently for everyone. And it shows up differently in our bodies and in our minds and the way we respond to our environment. So I really definitely want to unpack that with you.
No, let's talk a little bit about trauma, and how, and in this one case, how it can be revealed through play therapy in this instance. So with this child, at the time he was in the fourth grade when we first started working together, and had lost a parent violently 4 years prior. And as a result of that, and also as a result of, you know, being at the time maybe a 5-year-old who suddenly lost a parent without a real grasp or understanding of why and what even death was, there was a tendency kind of to be stuck, you know, in that time. Right. In that time physically. So there were issues with bowel control. In the classroom. Now, remember, I'm working at the time at a school. And so there were issues where sometimes the child would have an accident, even at the age of 9, and then at the age of 10 as well, as a growing young man. It became very invasive. It became very apparent, and it was something that started to lend itself to bullying and that sort of,
and more trauma.
And more trauma. And more. Right? And more trauma, while still grappling or still trying to understand what happened to their parent all those years before, because it was complicated. Like, it was something that was in the news. So it was like a re-traumatization because it was not resolved. So you can just imagine, right? Absolutely. Imagine even being an adult having to deal with that, but much less imagine being a child losing a significant caregiver at that time. So because of that, you know, I remember they had been seen by therapists prior to me for about 3 years, and we couldn't get this thing resolved. At least the idea of not reducing the number of accidents in 1 week, right? Because here we are he started in the kindergarten, went through, and here we are in 5th grade, and we're still having this issue. And I remember this was one of the infamous puppets that eventually I did order, and I got a little bit better with it, that he used, because we talked about him being, he really liked to rap, okay?
Oh, I love that.
He loved to rap.
I love that.
Now, how good he was, I don't know. But we would have rap battles and what have you, right? And it was interesting because I think his living parent was very skeptical of what therapy could do at this time. And I remember having, because that I would have to consent them and, invite them in and have a reassess and understand where, as a parent, they saw the progress of their child. They were not shy about saying, thanks for what you're about to think that you're going to do, but good luck. So I remember thinking, oh, okay, well, I was a little defeated, not going to lie, but,
And we do have to own that, and we'll share that to everyone that's here. It's like therapists are humans too, right? We're all human, and there's going to be bad days and good days. And we do take so much care in what we do. And we do feel sometimes defeated.
We do.
But we push through it, because in the end, it's really about how we show up. And that's what makes us so resilient and healers for our communities, because we acknowledge that.
No, thanks for pointing that out, because I remember just feeling like, okay, so family doesn't have, I did not verbalize support or belief or faith. But then I decided, you know what, at the time, I'm just going to continue to show up.
Yeah.
He continued to show up. He continued showing up. And I was like, okay. All right. So at some point he had exhausted most of the toys, because he'd been there for years. I was new to the situation, and he'd been coming in year after year. And we discovered this love of rap, battle rap to be battle rap. So me and my rhymes. And
are you going to rhyme for us today?
I wish.
I don't know.
I wish. I don't want to, I don't want to get a record deal. I'm going to stick to therapy. So I remember his homework would be to write, the rhymes. And then, because he was so shy, he was like, no, man. And he would turn around and the words wouldn't come out. But when we used the puppet, the puppet was nice.
Words. Wow.
The puppet was nice,
because it was a tool. It was his object, right? It was his safety.
Was his object. It was a non-threatening way, of him being able to impose and externalize the threat, So he felt free. He was just, manipulating the puppet. The puppet was, saying what the puppet felt. But we did have there were some rules to these raps, it couldn't just be about anything. It could be about something that was meaningful or something that they loved or something, what have you. And through that, though, it helped in the sense that it helped to regulate, him if he was having a hard day, so that he could go back to class and then not be disruptive and everything. But we did come to a point where it was discovered that he did need a higher level of care. Right. And I think, and at that moment, I thought, okay, well, we were able to discover that through, again, the play therapy, this puppet who was actually had a voice and was rapping about certain things that were very important. But that was the discovery. The discovery was at the time that in this particular case, I'm in over my head. And we would need to refer the child, and I had the conversation with the parent. And we were able to make a plan where they would see a trauma specialist outside of the school, but I was maintenance.
What's so beautiful, what you just said, is that there wasn't harm done to to your client, right? There's like it's not how people always associate therapists coming in and asking all these questions and diagnosing for just the purpose of diagnosing and medicating for just the purpose of medicating. You know, we're not showing up that way. We're
Yeah.
showing up to really kind of help them unpack and help them tell us what it is that is coming up for them. And then knowing when they need additional resources and tools. And so a trauma-informed therapist is what you noted that he was needing due to the, through puppet therapy and the properties that it has of healing. And he may not have like healed completely, but
Right.
you provided that healing space for him to show up and really be able to tell you what it was that he needed.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
that's part of the healing because it's a journey. It's don't you think, Karen, that like healing is like a lifelong journey and it really depends on the experience of each individual, and it's not just that simple of like 6 sessions or 8 sessions, right?
No, no, absolutely. One of the things that has been interesting has been to try to chip away at this idea that healing and mental health wellness and the journey is this linear thing.
Right.
Right. And, the pandemic has shown all of us that nothing is linear. Nothing is linear.
Nothing.
And if there's anything that we can take away from this shared experience, is that we do possess within ourselves an ability to learn, an ability to seek out help.
Mm-hmm.
When we've exhausted our personal resources, especially over this pandemic, a lot of people have mentioned to me either in session or just personal friends and family that things that used to work for them to get them to a better emotional state no longer do.
They don't serve a purpose sometimes anymore, right?
Right.
Because of the change, and everyone's changed, right? There's like our circumstances have changed, so we've changed in our circumstances.
Exactly. So it requires like this creativity, like around how we are going to heal. So like one of the things that is amazing about being able to be open in that way is that nothing is off. Nothing is guaranteed to work, which means that we can give ourselves permission to like try different things.
I love that. Giving ourselves permission to try different things. And also, to your point of you giving up permission for your little teachers and your guides and your clients to try what feels right for them. And when you open up that space in your room and they're coming in authentically, because I think that we can both say, kids are so special. There's so much honesty and there's so much rawness in regards to how they're coming in and helping them unpack. It's not linear. And none of our kids are monolithic and nor the same, and even in different age groups. And you giving them that space and having them come in and pick what property, what tool they want to be a part of and be an extension of themselves. And I know we only have like about 6 minutes, but I think that the healing benefits of puppetry is if we could like just bullet it, just maybe like 4 or 5 bullets, what do you think it is?
One of the ones that comes to mind are the highlighting of creativity, right?
Creativity.
A non-threatening way of talking about difficult things.
Yes, Karen, exactly. Very non-threatening and just being super vulnerable and being okay with being vulnerable through a object.
Right. Giving language and voice where there was none.
That's so beautiful. Giving language and voice when there was none.
Right. And I think those would be the major three. I think the other two that I can think of would like kind of like be tucked underneath those three. But those are the main three that come to mind. And it's been really. It's also important to point out that play therapy in puppetry is something therapeutically that is helpful to not just children, but for people for neurological reasons, like you mentioned before, or for reasons, for other reasons, have a difficulty with communication.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
even an adult with dementia, for instance, it's been seen that they have benefited from the therapeutic effects of puppetry.
I love that. That is so beautiful to note, because we can't just say that it works for just specific age groups. It's really about how clients show up and they tell us what they need. And there's so many different modalities to therapy, and people can get bored just listening to us kind of naming all the different modalities. But basically, when you are in a place and you're working with a clinician and you're showing up with specific needs that need to be met, there's different tools in our toolbox that we can use. And it doesn't matter the age, and it doesn't matter, it's just about you and how you're showing up. So we meet you right where you are. And I love that you mentioned working with adults in that way as well. What do you think, just last 3 minutes, what are some of the, let's go back to how we connected and through Latinx and social work, and why is it important for people to support this book and this movement and Latinx and social work, especially healing and inspiring others to really kind of become more engaged and attuned? What do you think it is?
I think there's definitely a need for there to be more of us who dedicate ourselves and our professionally and personally to the healing of all people, especially in I will speak for a moment for myself. There have also been people who have been disenfranchised and kind of glossed over and marginalized because they cannot find the proper healers who speak their language.
That's right.
Who look like they do.
Right.
And there is a huge need, especially now, like looking on the other side. Hopefully we see a glimmer of hope on the other side of this pandemic. This pandemic has left in its tracks a need for more of us. And if this book helps to inspire those who are already along this trajectory, or people who are thinking about it, I'm pretty sure it's going to open their eyes to things that they never thought of, and the possibilities as well.
Oh, I love that. And I want to give major props to our publisher, Fig Factor Media Publishing, who is an incredible woman, Jacqueline Reese Camacho, who has helped really bring this to life by giving us the space to do so. And just to let everyone know that partial proceeds of the book are going to scholarships to Latinx social workers through Latino Social Work Coalition, which is an incredible organization that provides scholarships to Latinx social workers while they are getting their graduate degree. Because again, it's not easy. Yeah, it's not easy getting to where we are, right? It's not. There's so many layers. And now that we're here, what are we doing? We're really trying to support our communities through healing. And we're also trying to create more space for all of us to come in as a collective and support our communities. Big thanks to Vecinos and Christy and the Puppet Festival for having us on. I am so honored and humbled to share in the space with you, Karen. And to all of you that are here today, I hope that you just you were able to just enjoy. And the Puppet Fringe Festival, folks, we really appreciate everything that you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.